She just wanted her mom to smile again. But when an 8-year-old girl whispered a prayer in an empty church, she had no idea a lonely millionaire was sitting in the back row and listening. Michael Hale had never stepped foot inside a church without being paid to. In his line of work, real estate development, skyscrapers, ruthless board meetings, faith was rarely part of the conversation. If it was, it came in the form of branding. Crosses repurposed as logos for luxury condos, or sanctuaries turned into boutique hotels. But that Sunday evening, something pulled him inside. The rain had been steady all afternoon, soaking his expensive suit as he wandered aimlessly through the city with no real destination. His phone was silenced. His driver was waiting somewhere blocks away, unaware that the usually decisive, meticulously scheduled CEO had decided, on a whim, to disappear for a while. Michael had money, power, properties in 3 countries. But none of that helped the stillness that had crept into his life over the past year. It wasn't loneliness exactly. Loneliness, at least, was something you could name. This was something colder, a kind of emotional numbness that even he had started to notice. He pushed open the heavy wooden door of the small neighborhood church and stepped inside. It was warm, quiet, the kind of quiet that hummed in your bones. Candles flickered along the stone walls. A few parishioners lingered near the front, heads bowed, still as statues. Michael chose a pew near the back and sat down, not sure what he was doing there. He didn't pray, didn't believe. But the stillness was a kind of balm, and he stayed. Then he heard it, a voice, small, steady, so quiet he wasn't sure it was real at first. "Please, make my mommy happy. She tries so hard." Michael turned his head slightly. A little girl knelt just a few pews ahead of him, alone. She couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. Her dress was soft yellow, her long, light blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail with a ribbon that drooped like a flower losing its petals. Her back was straight, her hands clasped. "She never complains," she whispered, "even when the car breaks again, even when she's tired. She smiles at me all the time, but I know it's not always real." Michael felt something tighten in his chest. "She says we don't need a daddy, but I think she just doesn't want me to feel sad. But I think she's sad. So, if you have a daddy you're not using, maybe he could be for her?" There was no drama in her voice, no sobbing, no tantrum, just quiet sincerity. Michael stared at her, unable to move. He didn't believe in miracles, didn't believe in divine intervention. But somehow this tiny stranger with big brown eyes had reached into the coldest corner of him and struck something he hadn't felt in years. She stood a moment later, adjusted her dress, and turned. Their eyes met for half a second. Hers were wide and calm, full of something far older than her years. She gave him a small nod, like she knew he'd been listening, and then walked back toward the aisle. He watched her skip lightly toward the back of the church where a woman stood waiting. Blonde, tall, striking. Her features were soft, but her posture was tired. She wore a simple brown dress and held a crumpled paper bouquet in one hand. The little girl ran up and hugged her around the waist. The woman leaned down, kissed the top of her head, and smiled in that way mothers do, with everything and nothing at once. Michael's breath caught. Something about the woman pulled at him, just like her daughter had. They didn't notice him. They walked past hand in hand, stepping out into the rain with no umbrella, their laughter swallowed by the closing church doors. He sat there long after they left. The prayer echoed in his mind like a forgotten song. "If you have a daddy you're not using." It was absurd, ridiculous, childlike. But as he stood and stepped into the rain again, the water soaking into his shoes, he realized something that chilled and warmed him all at once. That girl had been praying, and he had been the only one who heard. Michael didn't sleep much that night. He lay in his high-rise apartment, surrounded by glass, steel, and silence, a monument to his success. But all he could hear was her voice, that tiny, steady voice in the dark. "If you have a daddy you're not using." It looped in his head with startling clarity, like someone had etched it into the inside of his chest. He couldn't shake it. It followed him into the shower, whispered through the hiss of his coffee machine, filled the back of his mind even as he tried to review reports and approve architectural revisions. None of it mattered. Not today. By noon, he was in his car. "Don't take me to the office, son," he told his driver. "Find me the nearest flower shop. Small, neighborhood style. The driver blinked. Sir, you heard me. They drove for nearly 20 minutes before Michael spotted it through the rain-speckled window. A small sidewalk flower stand on the corner of a quiet block, tucked beneath the green awning of a bookstore. Color spilled from metal buckets onto the concrete. Tulips, sunflowers, wild daffodils wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. It was quaint, honest, a world away from the sleek showrooms his company designed. And standing behind the display was her, the mother. She wore the same brown dress as the night before, only now she had her sleeves rolled up and a daisy tucked behind her ear. Her hair was in a messy bun. She was trimming stems with focused hands in a gentle rhythm, calm, competent, unaware that she was a storm cloud in someone else's life now. And there she was too, the girl in yellow, Chloe. Michael stepped out of the car before he could talk himself out of it. He straightened his collar and crossed the street slowly, heart pounding harder than it ever had, walking into a boardroom full of billionaires. Chloe looked up first. Her face lit up the way a child recognizes something not entirely familiar, but not strange either. She beamed. You! Rachel glanced up. Chloe, don't... Then her eyes followed her daughter's finger, and she saw him. The recognition hit instantly, and for a second her body went still. Michael raised a hand. Hi, I'm sorry for showing up like this. Rachel didn't move. Her eyes were guarded. You're from the church. He nodded. Yes, I was sitting behind you yesterday. Chloe was already smiling. He heard my prayer. I told you someone heard it. Rachel's expression changed from surprise to tight discomfort. Chloe, why don't you go inside for a minute and grab the watering can? But I want to... Now, please. Chloe pouted but obeyed, slipping inside the tiny shop behind the stand. Rachel looked back at Michael. Are you following us? No, he said quickly. I didn't even know you'd be here. I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Rachel crossed her arms. What she said was private. She's a child. She doesn't understand boundaries. She understands everything, Michael said, voice lower now. She understands more than most adults I know. I didn't come here to bother you. I just wanted to know your name. She hesitated, eyes narrowing as she studied him. This man in a navy coat with expensive shoes, standing in front of her humble sidewalk business, like he'd wandered in from another universe. Rachel, she said finally. Rachel Brooks. He nodded. I'm Michael Hale. Her eyebrows twitched. Recognition. The name rang a bell. Maybe from the news, a real estate headline, or a magazine cover. But she said nothing. She's special, he added. Your daughter. Rachel softened. Just a little. She is, but she's also just a girl. She's been through enough already without having strangers follow her from churches. I'm not a threat, he said quickly. I don't want anything from you. I think I needed to hear what she said. Rachel tilted her head. Why? Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. The words didn't come easily. Not when he was used to presenting PowerPoints, not feelings. Because I forgot what it sounded like, he said finally. Hope. Real hope. Not the kind that comes with a contract or a quarterly projection. Just a child, asking the world for love. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You don't look like the kind of man who comes to church looking for love. I wasn't, he admitted. I was looking for silence. Didn't get much of that, did you? He smiled. Not quite. The door behind them opened and Chloe came out, dragging a metal watering can almost half her size. She saw them standing there, her mom's arms no longer crossed, Michael not trying to run. Can he help me water? She asked. Rachel hesitated. Michael met her eyes. She exhaled and gave a small nod. One flower box. Chloe grinned and handed him the can like she'd just offered him a golden scepter. Together, they leaned over a row of daisies and poured the water gently onto the soil. Michael felt the cold metal in his hands and the warmth of Chloe's shoulder against his side. It wasn't much. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And for a man who had forgotten what real felt like, it was everything. Michael found himself returning the next day. He told himself it was just to buy flowers, maybe for his assistant, maybe to leave in his cold, sterile apartment that had never held a vase before. But the truth was quieter and harder to justify. He didn't want to admit that something had shifted inside him, something that pulled him toward a place that wasn't chrome and boardrooms, but brick and concrete, softened by wildflowers and little girl laughter. The flower stand was open again when he arrived. The morning sun made the petals glow, and the shop buzzed softly with life. And there she was again, Chloe, crouched beside the crates, organizing potted violets by color. She spotted him and beamed. "You're back," she said, running over with an excitement that nearly bowled him over. Michael knelt down, smiling before he even realized it. "I told you those daisies looked thirsty yesterday." "They're dramatic flowers," she whispered conspiratorially. "They always need attention." He laughed. "Like someone I know?" She gasped in mock offense, then broke into a giggle and pulled him toward the counter. Rachel was there, restocking wrapping paper. When she saw him, she froze for a moment. Her hands stilled, and her smile tightened into something polite but unsure. "I see we have a returning customer," she said, carefully neutral. Michael straightened a little. "Couldn't stay away. Blame your daughter. She's a convincing little person." "She gets that from me," Rachel said dryly. But there was the faintest lift at the corner of her mouth. Chloe tugged on his coat sleeve. "Do you want to learn how to wrap a bouquet?" Michael blinked. "I absolutely do not know how to wrap anything." "That's what I said to Mommy when I was 5, she said proudly. "But now I'm a pro. I'll teach you." He looked at Rachel. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. So he stayed. They spent the next 30 minutes wrapping a small bouquet of tulips. Chloe gave instructions with all the seriousness of a world-renowned floral architect. Michael fumbled with the ribbon, nearly folded the paper backward twice, and accidentally taped his sleeve to the counter once. Rachel watched from behind the register, arms crossed but eyes softening. "You really have no idea what you're doing," she observed. "None," he said. "And I've built airports." She smiled finally, a real one, the kind that sneaks up without permission. When they finished, Chloe held up the finished bouquet, slightly lopsided with one tulip drooping dramatically to the left, like it was a trophy. "Masterpiece," she declared. "For you," Michael said, handing it to her with a small bow. Chloe gasped. "Really?" He nodded. "Made by the world's youngest bouquet boss and her clumsy assistant." She hugged it to her chest like he'd just given her the moon. Later, after Chloe went inside to color in the back room, Michael stayed behind and helped Rachel stack empty crates. They worked quietly side by side. The silence wasn't awkward. It was filled with something else. Something patient. "She likes you," Rachel said after a while. "I like her too," he replied. "A lot." She glanced over. "She doesn't let people in easily. She's careful, which is ironic because she talks to strangers like she's running for mayor." Michael chuckled. "She talked to me before I said a word. It was like she already knew something." "She's intuitive," Rachel said. "She sees things. Always has." Michael leaned against the wall. "Like what?" Rachel shrugged. "Loneliness, goodness, sadness. I don't know. All the things adults forget how to name." Michael nodded, letting her words sit between them. Then he said, "She said a prayer. In the church." Rachel's posture tensed, just slightly. "I know," she said softly. "I didn't mean to overhear," he added. "But I did, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since." Rachel looked at him now, fully, her eyes searching, guarded but open. "She's never known her father," she said after a long pause. "He left when she was just a baby. No goodbye, no help, no answers." Michael felt the heaviness in those words, the quiet strength it took to say them without bitterness. "I was angry for a long time," she continued. "But then, I got busy surviving. I built a life for her. For us. It's small, but it's real. And I've worked too hard to let anyone jeopardize that." "I'm not here to ruin anything," Michael said. I want to be around. If you'll let me." Rachel looked at him for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. "I don't need someone to save us, Michael. We're not a story that needs rescuing." He nodded. "I know. I'm not here to save anyone. I'm here because, for the first time in years, I want something real, something small, something honest." She was silent again. Then she said, "Okay." He blinked. "Okay?" Rachel crossed her arms. "You can keep visiting. For now. You water the flowers. You wrap the bouquets. You take bad coffee without complaining? He grinned. Deal. And if you hurt her, she added, her eyes suddenly sharp again, I will remove you from the planet. Michael laughed. Noted. He walked away that afternoon, not with a phone number or a date, but with a ribbon tied clumsily around his wrist, courtesy of Chloe. And somehow that felt like everything. The first thing Chloe did when Michael arrived the next morning was hand him a clipboard. It had a hand-drawn checklist on it, written in colored pencil, complete with misspelled flower names and boxes marked important or super important. She had drawn little stars next to the ones she wanted him to focus on. At the top, it read in big bubble letters, Today's mission, be a real flower guy. He stared at it like she'd just handed him the blueprint for a moon landing. Am I qualified for this? He asked. Chloe, already in her apron and sunglasses, she called them her boss shades, didn't hesitate. Nope, that's why you're training. Let's go. By now, he was used to her presence, the way she operated with more command than most people on his executive board, how she filled the space around her with both chaos and light. What he hadn't expected, though, was how quickly the flower stand had started to feel like a rhythm, like something his body recognized, even if his mind still struggled to catch up. Rachel wasn't out front yet. She was in the back room, prepping arrangements for a local wedding. But Michael could feel her presence in everything, in the way the storefront was set up, in the little handwritten price tags tied to each bouquet, in the quiet grace of the shop itself. He watered the pansies, per Chloe's instructions, then the violets, then promptly overwatered the succulents, causing Chloe to sigh and declare him not yet certified. At some point, she handed him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich from her backpack, wrapped in foil and pressed slightly flat by her math book. She offered no explanation. He just accepted it like it was currency. You don't eat enough, she said seriously, as if she were his life coach. Michael ate half, genuinely grateful. Then he handed the rest back. Do you want it? She nodded and took a bite without hesitation. Later, Rachel finally emerged from the back. She wore a black tank top and jeans, her blonde hair pulled up in a clip. Her hands were stained with pollen. There was something beautiful about her like that. Unfiltered, mid-task, entirely herself. She paused when she saw them. Chloe lounging beside Michael on a crate, explaining the theory of color matching in bouquet design like she was teaching a college course, and Michael nodding as if he understood every word. Rachel leaned against the doorframe and just watched. It had been weeks now, weeks of his return, his awkward, steady, ridiculous return. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't push. He didn't overpromise. He showed up every morning, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with jokes, sometimes with nothing but a willingness to listen, and slowly the edges she'd sharpened to protect herself began to dull. That afternoon, after Chloe was picked up by her babysitter for an after-school activity, Rachel sat across from Michael on the back stoop behind the shop. The sun was softening into gold, and the shadows stretched long across the alley. Michael took a sip from a paper cup and offered her one. She raised an eyebrow. You brought me the same thing as yesterday. You liked it yesterday. You're making assumptions, she said, but she took the cup anyway. They sat in silence for a while. The good kind. The kind that doesn't itch to be filled. Then Rachel spoke. You know she prays every night? Michael turned. She told me. I used to listen outside her door, she said quietly. At first she prayed for her dolls, then her classmates. Then when she was 5, she started asking for a dad. I never knew what to say. I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't know how to explain why he wasn't there. She thinks you're a superhero, Michael said. Rachel smiled, but it was faint. I'm just a woman trying to make rent and keep her kid's heart from breaking. You've done both. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, why are you still here? It wasn't accusatory, just honest. Curious. Michael leaned back against the wall, letting the warmth of the bricks press into his spine. I used to think I had everything, he said. Money, recognition, a company that people wrote articles about. But I was numb, completely hollow. He looked over at her. Then I sat in a pew behind a little girl in yellow who whispered a prayer she didn't know anyone could hear. And something in me cracked open. I didn't come here to rescue anyone, Rachel. I came because I think I need rescuing. She blinked, not expecting the vulnerability. I don't want a perfect story, she said after a moment. And I'm not giving her to someone who's just looking for redemption. I'm not asking for her, he said. I'm asking for a chance to be worthy of even standing near the world you two built. Rachel looked away. Then she whispered, "It's not perfect." "It's real," he replied, "and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Her throat tightened. She stood abruptly, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Okay," she said. "We open at 8 tomorrow. If you're late, Chloe's docking your pay." He smiled. "Understood, boss." She paused in the doorway. "Michael?" "Yeah?" "You're getting better with the flowers." He watched her disappear inside. And that evening, as he walked home beneath the lowering sky, he realized something that settled deep in his chest. For the first time in his life, he was being rooted. And he was learning slowly how to stay. Michael wasn't prepared for how much he'd come to rely on the quiet. The flower stand, the early mornings with Chloe, the clinking of watering cans, the smell of fresh cut stems and Rachel's low hum as she rearranged roses by color, it had all become something sacred. A rhythm that grounded him, gave his mornings shape and his evenings purpose. He kept the visits quiet. No chauffeurs, no assistants, no headlines. Just him and them. Until the day everything fractured. It started like any other morning. The air was crisp, still heavy with spring dew. Chloe was drawing on the chalkboard sign out front, sketching stick figure tulips and writing, "Best flowers in the galaxy, maybe the universe," in crooked letters. Michael was tying twine around a bouquet, his fingers clumsy as ever. Rachel was inside preparing a delivery, her hair twisted into a low bun, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Then came the shutter click. It was subtle at first, faint, barely registered. Michael turned just in time to catch a man across the street lowering a long-lens camera and ducking behind a parked car. His stomach dropped. He stepped away from the stand, heart tightening, and scanned the block. Another man in a dark jacket leaned casually against a lamppost, looking down at his phone. But the angle of his shoulders said otherwise. Paparazzi. He swore under his breath. It wasn't the first time he'd been followed. A few years ago, after landing a major overseas deal, the tabloids had dubbed him New York's silent shark. Cameras had trailed him through airports, restaurants, private fundraisers. It had faded eventually, as all things do. But now, after months of intentional disappearance, it seemed someone had found him again. And this time, they'd found more than him. Rachel stepped outside with a clipboard in her hand. She saw his expression immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. Michael glanced toward the street. The photographer was gone, but the damage was done. "I think I've just complicated your life," he said, voice low. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "There were photographers. Just now. They got pictures. Of me, of Chloe, of you." She froze. "Why would they?" "Because I used to be someone the press cared about," he said, "and apparently I still am." Rachel stared at him, her jaw tightening. "You said you weren't that man anymore." "I'm not," he said quickly. "At least I haven't been in months. But that doesn't mean the world stops watching." "And now they'll be watching us?" she asked, her voice rising. Michael took a step closer. "I'll handle it. I'll talk to my team. They'll bury the story." "You think I care about burying it?" she snapped, stepping back. "I care about Chloe. I care about our privacy, our peace. Do you know what it's like to be a single mom and have people whisper about you for no reason? Now you've given them a reason?" Michael's throat tightened. "Rachel, I didn't plan this." "No, you never planned any of it," she said, hurt flickering in her eyes. "You just walked in, like it was your right. And I let you. I let you into her life, into mine. And now everything I've spent years building could unravel because you couldn't stay invisible." "I'm not the enemy," he said softly. "Maybe not," she said, quieter now. "But you're not safety either." Chloe stepped out of the shop then, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Mommy," she said, blinking. "Why are you mad?" Rachel immediately forced a calm smile. "I'm not, baby. Just talking." Chloe looked between them. She wasn't stupid. She felt the tension like a change in air pressure. Michael knelt down, trying to hide the heaviness in his voice. "Hey, kiddo, I think I need to go early today. I've got work stuff." Chloe's face fell. "But we haven't made the sunflower bundles yet." "I know," he said, forcing a smile. "Rain check?" She nodded slowly. "Will you still come tomorrow?" Michael looked up at Rachel. She didn't answer. Chloe turned to her mom. Can he? Rachel's expression was unreadable. She looked at Michael, her eyes filled with 1,000 layered thoughts. Then she turned to her daughter. Why don't you go inside and finish your sign? I'll be right there. Chloe lingered for a moment, then obeyed. Rachel turned to Michael. I need space, she said. Not because I don't care, but because I do, and I'm terrified of what this means for her. I understand, he said, voice tight. I let you in because you showed me someone real. I don't want to see that man disappear into a headline. I won't let it happen. I don't know if you can stop it, she said, and that's what scares me. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And then with nothing more to say, he walked away. Not because he wanted to, but because he understood that sometimes love means stepping back, not pushing forward. That night, the photo appeared online. Grainy, out of focus, but real. Michael Hale, reclusive millionaire, spotted with mystery child and woman at NYC flower shop. Michael stared at the headline alone in his apartment, the lights off, the screen burning into the dark. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel fear for himself. He felt it for someone else. Michael stayed away. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. 3 days had passed since the photo hit the internet. In that time, the blog post had been picked up by gossip sites, then business magazines, then trending hashtags. His PR team called. His board emailed. Sponsors asked questions. Reporters swarmed the front of his building for a full 48 hours. Headlines flared up, then died down as the next scandal hit someone else. But not for him. He didn't care about the noise. Not really. What consumed him was the silence that followed. The silence from a corner flower stand where joy had bloomed, and then just as suddenly withered. He hadn't heard from Rachel. Not a word. Not even a text. He hadn't dared reach out. And Chloe? She didn't have his number, but he couldn't stop replaying her voice in his head. Will you still come tomorrow? He didn't. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know if he was welcome. And for a man who'd spent a lifetime being invited, respected, and listened to, that uncertainty was paralyzing. His penthouse felt different now. The sleek leather, the curated artwork, the untouched kitchen, all of it felt sterile, cold, a monument to a life that had once made sense. Now it only reminded him of what was missing. He stood in front of the mirror that night, still in a crumpled dress shirt and socks, and stared at the man he'd become. Sharp jawline, tired eyes. A man who looked like power but suddenly felt like glass. He touched his wrist. Bare now. The pink beaded bracelet Chloe had given him had snapped during a frantic press call 2 days ago. He hadn't told anyone. He'd picked up the beads from the floor in silence and kept them in a velvet watch case, like something sacred. The next morning, he woke up early. He walked, no driver, no bodyguards, no phone, just the city and his steps. By the time he reached the flower shop, the sun had barely risen. The windows were dark. The stand was empty. It felt abandoned, quiet, closed. But the chalkboard sign out front had new writing on it. The doodles were fresh, the chalk still slightly wet from dew. Sorry, flowers sleeping today. Be kind to sad things. Come back tomorrow. Underneath, in smaller letters. Chloe Michael stared at it, heart caught somewhere between grief and gratitude. He sat on the bench across the street for 2 hours. Rachel never came outside, so he left a small envelope tucked under the flower buckets, weighed down by a tiny rock. Inside was a letter, handwritten. No branding, no logo, just him. It read, Rachel, I wish I could undo the way the world invaded your peace. But I also know that I can't control everything. I can only control what I do next. And I want you to know, I'm still here. Not in headlines, not in suits, just here. If you want me to stay gone, I will. But if there's still room in your world for a man who's learning to be human again, I'll be wherever you need me. Tell Chloe the bracelet lives in a box next to my watch. I couldn't fix it, but I couldn't throw it away either. I miss you both. Michael. He walked away, not looking back this time. And while he didn't expect anything to change, he also didn't expect what happened next. The very next afternoon, his doorbell rang. No security notice. No scheduled meeting. Just the echo of the chime in his silent apartment. He opened the door and froze. Chloe stood there. in her yellow dress, holding a tiny box wrapped in tissue paper. Behind her, Rachel stood quietly. She didn't speak, didn't smile. But she didn't walk away either. Michael knelt. Chloe handed him the box. Inside was a new bracelet. Pink, plastic, beaded, badly, lopsided. It read, "Still Dad 2.0." Chloe tilted her head. "You don't disappear again, okay?" Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "I won't. Not ever again." Rachel stepped forward finally. She looked him in the eyes, still guarded, but no longer closed. "I didn't send her," she said. "She insisted." "I believe that," he said. "She's a little unstoppable." Rachel gave the faintest smile. Then she added, "But I didn't stop her either." Michael looked at both of them, and he realized in that moment forgiveness didn't always arrive as a grand gesture. Sometimes it came as a box of beads, a knock on the door, and a mother who decided to stay still, just long enough to let someone catch up. He reached out, gently took Rachel's hand. She didn't pull away. And in the quiet that followed, something like peace began to take root again. Michael didn't ask for anything when they came back into his life. He didn't ask for forgiveness or explanations or even time. What he gave instead was presence. Quiet, steady presence. The kind that couldn't be bought or scheduled. He started showing up again, but not in grand gestures. He brought breakfast in paper bags and waited outside the shop until they unlocked the doors. He restocked the ribbon drawer without being asked. He learned the difference between peonies and ranunculus. He learned to listen, not to respond, but to understand. Chloe noticed it first. "You don't talk as much anymore," she said, watching him wipe down empty buckets. "Is that good or bad?" he asked with a grin. She shrugged. "Good. It means you're paying attention." Michael smiled at that, because she was right. He had spent so many years filling silences, with strategy, with certainty, with noise. Now he was learning to leave space for other people's words, especially theirs. One afternoon, Rachel handed him a box. "Here," she said, "we're cleaning out the back storage. These are things Chloe outgrew." Michael opened the box carefully. Inside were old shoes, faded picture books, a few hair bows, and a Polaroid of Chloe as a toddler holding a bouquet half her size. "She used to play shop back there," Rachel said. "Lined up plastic flowers on crates and tried to sell them to me for hugs." Michael picked up the photo, heart tightening. "She was so small." "She still is," Rachel said. "But she's also big enough to notice when people leave." He looked at her, guilt rising. "I'm not leaving." "I know," she said, softer now, "but she doesn't know that yet." "Not fully?" Michael nodded, understanding more in that moment than words could say. That weekend, Chloe had her school play. She was a sunflower now, one of 12. Her costume had paper petals and glitter that stuck to everything. Rachel had stitched the hem by hand and stayed up late helping her memorize her lines. Chloe had 2 tickets to give away. She gave one to her mom, and without hesitation, the other to Michael. Rachel looked at him when she found out. "She didn't even ask me." "She doesn't have to," he said. "Not anymore." The night of the play, he arrived 30 minutes early, bouquet in hand. He wore a sweater instead of a suit, sat beside Rachel in the front row. The auditorium smelled like cafeteria pizza and glue, and the sound system crackled every time a microphone moved. And when Chloe walked onto that stage in her crumpled costume and shouted, "I am the sun that never sets," Michael felt something in his chest crack wide open. Rachel looked at him then, not sharply, not cautiously, but with a warmth he hadn't seen in her since the beginning. "She's not just performing," she said quietly. "She's believing. I can see that." Afterward, Chloe barreled down the stairs into their arms. Rachel hugged her first. Then she turned to Michael, eyes glowing with pride, and threw her arms around his waist. "You came." "I wouldn't miss it for anything," he whispered, crouching to her level. She handed him a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing, the 3 of them standing in front of the flower shop, arms linked. Above their heads, Chloe had written in uneven letters, "My family." Not a pretend one, a real one. Michael couldn't speak. He just held the paper like it was the most valuable thing he'd ever been given. Because it was. Later that night, as they walked home, Chloe holding both their hands and chattering about her next role. "I want to be a cloud next time. Rachel slowed her steps. "She's letting you in," she said. "I know. And so am I." He looked at her. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "But I don't think you'll run." "I won't." Rachel looked forward again. Then she added almost to herself, "I hope you're ready for messy mornings and broken coffee machines. I'll learn how to fix them. And tantrums about sock seams. I'll buy backup socks." She finally smiled. "Good, because this isn't a fairy tale. It's a small life, but it's ours." Michael squeezed her hand. "That's the only kind I want now." That night they didn't say, "I love you." It was too soon, and maybe it wasn't necessary yet. But something was said anyway. In looks, in gestures, in the shared breath of quiet, trusted space. Not perfect, not planned, but chosen. And sometimes that's more powerful than love declared in words. The seasons began to change. Spring folded into early summer, and the city, for once, felt warm in more ways than just weather. Michael still woke early, only now it wasn't for investor calls or flight schedules. It was to open the shop with Chloe, who insisted he arrive no later than 8 o'clock or risk being demoted to vase cleaner. He never missed it. He was learning the life he'd never imagined for himself. Not just how to tie proper bows or arrange lilies without bruising their petals, but how to make waffles without burning them, how to braid hair badly, how to listen without fixing, and how to sit still with people who trusted him enough to let silence be enough. He and Rachel didn't define what they were, not yet, but something existed between them, deeper than romance, older than time. It was built in morning glances, in shared laughter over spilled lemonade, in the way she'd reach out to adjust the collar of his shirt without even realizing it. Sometimes he'd find her watching him from across the cafe, coffee in hand, something soft in her eyes. She never rushed him. She never asked for anything more than what he was already giving. And that in itself made him want to give her everything. One evening, Rachel invited him over for dinner. Not takeout, not cafe leftovers, a real dinner. "I don't cook for people I don't trust," she said flatly. "Then I'll eat whatever it is without question," he replied. "Even if it's a casserole? If it's made by you, yes." Chloe set the table. She made name cards. Hers said Best Actress. Rachel said Boss. Michael said Still Trying. He laughed when he saw it. After dinner, they sat on the couch, all three of them, watching Chloe's favorite animated movie. Halfway through, Chloe fell asleep across their laps, her breathing slow and even. Michael didn't move. Rachel looked over, her voice barely a whisper. "She does that when she feels safe." He turned his head slightly. "She should always feel safe." "She didn't for a long time," Rachel admitted. "She does now." Rachel reached over and rested her hand on his. Neither of them spoke. The TV continued playing softly, but neither watched. They were too caught in the stillness of the moment. The absolute, unspeakable magic of being here, of not needing to run or explain or wait for something better. It was this, exactly this. Later that week, Chloe insisted they take a photo together outside the flower shop. Like a real family portrait, but with dirt on our hands. Rachel rolled her eyes but agreed. The photo wasn't perfect. Chloe blinked. Michael had a smudge on his cheek. Rachel's hair was messy from the wind. But when Chloe printed it out with the shop's old inkjet, she wrote something at the bottom in bold black marker. "You don't have to match to belong." Michael kept a copy on his desk. Not his office desk. That space belonged to a different man now. But the little desk in the back of the shop where he filed order receipts and tried to remember what customers liked the extra lavender. On the anniversary of the day he first walked into the church, Michael returned. Alone. Not because he needed forgiveness, but because he wanted to say thank you. He sat quietly in the same back pew and lit a candle. He didn't pray, but he closed his eyes and thought of a yellow dress and a whisper in the dark. "Please, make my mommy happy." That night, when he returned to the flower shop, Chloe was waiting with her sketch pad. She handed him a new drawing, a house with a garden, a small cafe sign, 3 people and a cat. They didn't have one yet, but she was manifesting it. Above them, in block letters, she'd written, "We're not perfect, but we're us." Michael looked down at her. "You're really good at this." "I know," she said with a grin. "Also, I made you taller this time." He smiled, pulled her close, and whispered, "Thank you for praying for me, before you even knew I needed you." "I didn't pray for you," she said, wrinkling her nose. "I prayed for Mommy." He laughed. "Fair enough." Rachel walked in from the kitchen just then and leaned against the doorway. "What are you two plotting now?" "World domination," Chloe said. "Bedtime," Rachel countered. Chloe groaned, but didn't argue. She headed off down the hall, trailing glitter from her art supplies. Michael stood and met Rachel at the doorway. "She still makes me earn it," he said. "She should." They stood in the doorway a moment longer. Then Rachel reached up, gently touched his face and said, "You can stay tonight, if you want." Michael didn't answer with words. He simply stepped inside. And with that small, quiet movement, the door finally closed behind the man who had once walked into their lives by accident and stayed by choice. The little family that wasn't supposed to be, finally was. As the author, I didn't want this story to end with perfection. I wanted it to end with truth. Michael, Rachel, and Chloe aren't fairy tale characters. They're flawed, messy, and real. And that's exactly why their story matters. The ending isn't wrapped in a bow, it's wrapped in effort, in the quiet, everyday bravery of choosing each other despite the past. Michael doesn't save anyone. He learns how to stay. Rachel doesn't forgive instantly. She watches, waits, and lets him earn it. And Chloe, wise beyond her years, is the thread that quietly pulls two grown hearts back to life. What moved me most in writing this final chapter was that their family isn't about matching blood or perfection. It's about showing up, again and again, with humility, with patience, with love. Because sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we build, not the ones we expect. And that, to me, is the most honest kind of happy ending.